Hello, this is Dr. Scott Hoye. This is part 2 of our conversation with Dr. David Burns. But speaking of that, maybe we can talk about your book and your app. And I'm immensely enjoying this. So if we can continue, I have an open. I don't know what your schedule looks like, but if we can continue.
No, I'm not on a time pressure at the moment, and okay. It's so much fun to talk to you. Were you in clinical psychology? Was that your training?
Yeah, my school was in clinical psychology. I went to the Adler School of Professional Psychology, so the Dreikersian kind of CBT model of integrative model. Was part of my training plus CBT, and a lot of the clinicians I studied under in my actual clinical training were cognitive behavioral or and psychodynamic kind of mixed and integrated.
Yeah, I always love working with psychologists. I should have been one, instead of going to medical school.
But you have this insight into the foundation of the serotonergic model of depression, and like for instance. Irving Kirsch is a psychologist who wrote He wrote a book. He's part of Division 30 of APA, which I'm a member.
The Emperor's New Drugs.
Exactly, and
great book. Yeah, you all should read that book. It's a little paperback you can get on Amazon. I think I even did a little preface to it for him or something.
I think you did. It's a fantastic book. You would be able to do it that way, but probably without building upon your research. And you would never have been able to have done that. And the placebo effect. And we could go on for hours and hours about why medications might get an effect with people, which would make a lot of prescribing psychiatrists and PCPs bothered by that, I'm sure. But
especially the psychiatrists, not so much the general practice doctors.
Right. Yeah.
But the psychiatrists get pretty ticked off.
They do, yeah.
When their livelihood is threatened, really.
Well, and that's a large part where we talked about the livelihood of the psychotherapy model and the hour-long or 53 and 57-minute session.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that could be tinkered with to make it better, I'm sure, but it would... vast monolithic structures would get very upset with us.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, we haven't talked much about the T.E.A.M model.
Yeah.
I never studied Eriksson, although I love the Jeffrey Zeig's annual conferences and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He even spent a night at our home a few years back, and it was really, really delightful.
I bet.
But my assessment of resistance, people have said, this sounds an awful lot like you must have studied with Eriksson or something. I said, no, I don't know anything about him, but people have said that the paradoxical approach to resistance was very kind of a key to the rapid recoveries that he saw as well.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back through the literature of his case studies, you can see where he's just doing in vivo techniques with patients, taking them to a restaurant when they're afraid to talk to a waitress, engaging a waitress to be involved in the therapy by becoming a date for the person, and exposing them to dancing with a girl, things like that, which of course in today's litigious age would not go over very well, but you can see the case studies.
We still do a lot of things like that. You have to be mindful, but before COVID came out, I did Sunday hikes also for the students in the Tuesday training group. And they can do personal work on the hikes. Mm-hmm. Because part of therapy is doing your own personal work.
Yeah.
And all the people who come to the Tuesday group at Stanford seem to be very insecure. We have therapists from all different persuasions, but they all seem very insecure, and a lot of them have social anxiety. And a lot of times, if I'm working with them on their social anxiety on one of the hikes, we're going on these trails, I say, now, one thing I want you to do is talk to strangers and tell them that you've had social anxiety ever since you were a child and that you've been hiding it from everyone because you're ashamed. And today you've decided to stop hiding it, and that's why you told them. And And they say, "Oh, I couldn't possibly do that," or "that's too extreme," things like that. And then, lo and behold, someone comes down the trail, and I say, "Could we stop you here for a minute? This young woman has something she needs to tell you." And then I force them to say this, and then they get fantastic results from people, and it can be life changing. Then we do other, helpful but outrageous things as well. We also have a thing for social anxiety called shame attacking exercises that Albert Ellis was the one who created that.
Yeah.
And about once a year, I used to take my Tuesday group over to the Stanford Mall, which is right across the street from our behavioral sciences outpatient psych building, and then doing shame attacking exercises in the mall, because the theory is, as a shrink, you have to be willing to do anything you ask your patients to do. And one of the things we ask shy patients to do is make a fool of yourself in public to get over your fear of appearing foolish, so you discover the world doesn't come to an end. So we go over to the mall, and we might lie down and tell people walking past, "You should lie down here with us. It's like being on the beach in Miami. It's really nice." Or whatever crazy thing that you're doing. And there's a lot of things you can do. Leave the office and go into the real world with the patient.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that was one of the things that Milton Eriksson did, but I think that's, why should we be trapped in an office?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. And you're right. You're absolutely right. But with different world. I mean, he. If you get a chance, I'll plug a book. His Conversations with Milton Eriksson. There's a 3-volume set that Jay Haley and I think it was John Weakland did. They would hang out in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, before Eriksson became crippled with the second bout of polio.
I didn't know that.
It's just a totally different kind of therapist, and I'm sure Dr. Zeig has talked about that with you. Like, maybe he has, but
not so much. He talks about what he's doing now, which is interesting.
Oh yeah, and his take on it. He's made a lot of things his own. But if you look at the course of his development as a therapist, in those conversations, he talks about working on psych wards, doing outrageous things, paradoxical things with patients. And then he'll append it by saying, "Yeah, I got in trouble doing that with the nurses. I got in a lot of trouble with the nurses."
Oh, yeah. You have to be careful and think on multiple levels simultaneously to use these extreme techniques, but they can be really life-changing for people.
Yeah. So, but the team technique, can you tell me a little bit about that team's cognitive behavioral therapy, maybe to kind of close that out and move on to talking about the book and the app that you have going on?
Oh, sure. Well, just in the methods part of team, I've developed well over 100 techniques to help crush the negative thoughts that cause depression and anxiety, and they're drawn from at least a dozen schools of therapy that we're agnostic. We're not trying to promote. It isn't a school of therapy. Team is not. It's just a structure for how all of psychotherapy works. And at the methods phase, if someone says, "I'm a hopeless case," or "I'm a worthless human being," or whatever, or if during a panic attack the patient has the thought, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my mind, or I'm going to have a heart attack and die, or whatever. I use all these techniques to crush those thoughts, because the very moment the patient stops believing those thoughts, in that very instant he or she will suddenly feel radically different. But there are for sure a lot of cognitive techniques. There's a lot of paradoxical techniques. There's some empathy based, kind of Rogerian techniques. There's, kind of psychodramatic gestalt type techniques like externalization of voices. And then there's spiritual mystical component like the acceptance paradox. Mm-hmm. There's the 4 deaths of the self for the patient and the corresponding 4 deaths for the therapist, the great deaths of the self. There's a lot of different dimensions to it, and the main guidelines is what you're doing is, safe and ethical, but also that you're showing with the data at the start and end of the session that you're actually causing dramatic and rapid changes in your patient's negative feelings. And then once all the feelings go to zero and the patient's in a state of euphoria, then I do like a 20 or 30 minute relapse prevention training, because there's a 100% chance everyone will relapse
Absolutely.
forever. And so you just have to know it's going to happen, and here's what to do when it happens. But that's kind of that. Now the book and the app, when Feeling Good came out, my first book came out in 1980. It's not a self-help book. I was just excited about this new thing I was learning. And I thought maybe if patients are in therapy, they could read this book and then accelerate their progress. That was kind of what I was thinking. And then a psychologist at University of Alabama, Forrest Gogan, started doing research on Feeling Good, and I didn't know about his work. I would have been kind of anxious, I think, if I'd known it was going on, but he wanted to see if the book itself had antidepressant properties. And we were saying, what's the cheapest way to treat depression? And at that time, you could buy it for $2.40 wholesale if you'd buy 49 copies from the publisher. So he started handing the book to people who were depressed, looking for treatment at the medical center. I think University of Alabama is where he was located. And like yourself, he was a clinical psychologist, but a research focus. And he handed the book to patients and said, it's going to be 4 weeks before you can see your doctor, but in the meanwhile, read this book. And then they tested them every week with depression tests. Like at the time, they were using the Beck Depression Inventory. And then they were surprised that by the end of the 4 weeks, 50 to 65% of the patients had improved so much that they no longer needed or wanted therapy. And then he did 3-year follow-up studies on them as well to say, are they just going to relapse? And he reported all of these studies in top psychology journals, like Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology and others. And the long term was good. They didn't seem to relapse. And then they used placebo books like Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning to see, is this a placebo effect? Would reading any book work? And the Frankl book didn't have antidepressant effects. And they kept seeing this. And by the time I heard about it, he had 8 or 10 published studies on Feeling Good. And it blew my mind, because I didn't think the book itself would have antidepressant properties. It never occurred to me. And then I thought, wow, if a book can be that good, I think I could create an app that would be even better. And since the book was almost as good as outcome studies with antidepressants or with human therapists, I would say was as good. I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could create an app that would outperform human therapists? Okay. And I had a dickens of a time getting anyone to help me. But finally, I found some really cool people. And about 2 years ago, we started creating this thing. Jeremy Carmel was a Stanford student, and he had helped put DoorDash on the map. Okay, yeah. And he came to me and said, now I'd like to use my programming skills, because he had been depressed, and he went to one of my students after years of, failed therapy and pills and stuff. And within 2 weeks, he was cured. And he said, I want to turn this into an app. Do you want to work with me? And so we started working together 2 years ago, and now we have a little team. We're just starting to look for some financing. We've been kind of self-paying for it. But we just completed a beta test with 140 people who most of whom were depressed. and we measured 7 emotions. And this is a 1-day beta test. How much improvement could we cause in people in one single day? And we measured depression, anxiety, guilt, hopelessness, anger, inadequacy, and loneliness, and also happiness. Mm-hmm. And we looked at the group as a whole, and then we also looked at the 60 patients who were the most severe, and they were way more severe than have ever appeared in any outcome study. Mm-hmm. And in both groups, the results were pretty fantastic. We were seeing from 60 to nearly 80% reduction in all of these negative emotions. Mm-hmm. And
wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, exceeds what human therapists have ever been able to do in any period of time. And then in the most severe group, the 1-day boost in happiness was 80%, which was just jaw-dropping. And that was just a tiny portion of the app that we tested, just that people could use a little piece of it in 1 day. And part of it was screwed up, too. Because a part of that thing wasn't working properly. Oh, so it was like a bump in the road. We've smoothed that out. But yes,
the app itself wasn't working as it was intended to, and they still got results.
Part wasn't.
Right. So maybe the results would have gone up more.
It still produced tremendous results.
So is the algorithm such that it's able to like respond basically with, if you're saying such and such, you're rating yourself, I guess, as a baseline. Maybe you can take us into how without giving away trade secrets, of course, how the app works.
Well, there's 2 basic components of the app. Uh-huh. One component was what we treated as part of what we call the basic training. You have to learn certain ideas. You have to know about how negative thoughts can be distorted. So there's a distortion training part. There's a positive reframing part to where we bring the user's resistance to change to conscious awareness and then melt it away using a variety of paradoxical techniques and stuff like that. We teach them just a couple of the more than 100 techniques for crushing their own negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. And that was the part that we tested. And then, but there's many more parts because I've now developed training on how to use probably 15 additional techniques. They only really learn 1 or 2 in that basic training. And then there will also be a simple daily mood log that they can use each day to trap their negative thoughts and work on them using these techniques. And it could be combined with human therapists. I always say that the app, human therapists will never be able to compete with this app because no one is that smart. No, it's too good.
There's also no ego involved in it. And
no
suppositions, right?
When I tell therapists you're screwing up, they get all upset, and then they need treatment. You know what I mean? They're so fragile or devoted to their meditation or their EMDR or their psychodynamics or their traditional Beckian cognitive therapy. But the computer doesn't care. And then the computer also does research on itself to determine how it works.
What about using it in tandem? Since it takes out, like, it's kind of like, the old, I don't know who's developed it, but I learned it from neuro-linguistic programming training years ago, which is basically watered down Eriksson and Virginia Satir and other things, and Gestalt, Fritz. The idea of if you can say something and put it in quotes, you distance it. If someone else says it, it's gospel. So for the therapist, so you're getting this feedback, and there's okay, the app is saying this. Maybe the next step in an in-person session would be to do X, Y, or Z, or retry this reframe.
I also tell therapists, you can do something we can't do,
right?
And we can do something you can't do,
right?
So maybe 1 + 1 would be 3, and how phenomenal would that be if we could even accelerate further? But the neat thing is once we see the app tells us exactly what parts are working and what parts are not, and to what degree.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so then when we see something that the users don't like or that doesn't cause changes in their negative moods, then we just change it. And that's
something new.
The app has the big advantage because, it, as you say, there's no ego. All it cares about is getting fast results, fast-lasting results.
Yeah, I think the more flexibility you have, and you're also kind of modeling it. If you think of like therapy as a modeling, if you're more flexible and open and empathic, the app can be probably at least flexible. If it doesn't experience empathy, at least can be flexible.
I've thought of measuring empathy. I think we'll do it in our next beta release and ask them to rate the app for empathy and helpfulness, and then we can do a head-to-head competition with human therapists, because I believe human therapists, I know they'll fail on empathy because my scales show that they all fail. If they haven't had the training, they fail every session. So, and I think the app will actually get higher empathy and helpfulness ratings than human therapists.
So we want that's just kind of funny because it means that empathy, we as for those of you out there who are getting bogged down by what David and I are talking about, empathy is typically looked at as cognitive or emotional. And therapists probably don't know how they're coming across either way. And
right.
It's more of the perceived empathy that's more important.
Yeah.
Which in factors, it's what the patient can, it's really about what the
right.
patient can bring. Factor analysis of psychotherapy, they're the biggest factor in outcome.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
And when empathy is rated by the therapist, there have been over 100 published studies like that, it's never correlated with anything. It's only when patients rate the therapist empathy that it has big association with outcome.
Well, it's probably correlated with the ego of the therapist.
Yeah, right. That's right.
This is fascinating. Then, so the app is in beta. It's probably going to move into some other new direction soon, and
we're building up to a new a beta test. We're very excited about because the app. We have 5 people working on it, so it evolves every single day. And if any of the users want to give it a try, they can go to my website, which is filled with free resources, by the way. Almost everything on my website is free. And there's a lot of training there for therapists and patients alike. But it's www.feelinggood.com/app. Now, feeling good is one word with 2 G's in the middle, feelinggood.com and /app. And then you can sign up there to be a beta tester if you want. And then you'll find like the Feeling Good podcasts on my website, and there are links to all of them. There's a free anxiety class. There's a free depression class. I just think that a lot of people don't have a lot of money, although I guess a lot of people do, but around the world, I think, people don't have a lot of money, and that's why I'm trying to create as many of these free resources as I can.
Okay, excellent. So it's coming out of the goodness of your heart as a healer, as a human being. What about the book, Feeling Great? Is that an upgrade of Feeling Good? It's not just feeling good anymore; it's feeling great. Or what is it?
It's more than an upgrade. My publishers wanted me to do a redo of Feeling Good, and I picked it up and read it. Well, I didn't read much of it because I'm a slow reader, but I just glanced through and picked up a paragraph here or a sentence there, and I said, "My God, this is a beautiful book. I see why it's been so popular," and because I hadn't looked at it in 40 years, and
so it's a brand new perspective.
Yeah. I said this book doesn't need any change, and that would be a terrible thing to do. It's still working. It's still helping people recover from depression. And I've made so many discoveries since this was 40 years ago when that book came out. I think we need a new book. And so Feeling Great has all the new innovations, all the positive reframing, all the paradoxical stuff, as well as upgrades on the original cognitive therapy techniques. And then there's more on the philosophical underpinnings for people who are interested too. Like there's a chapter called "Join the Grateful Dead." And it's about the great deaths of the self that correspond to recovery from depression, anxiety, relationship problems, and habits and addictions, and to kind of open the eyes of therapists and patients alike that recovery is more than a psychological process. Something happens at a deep level when people have this born-again type of experience where they go suddenly into recovery, and it's like an aha for them. They see things at a much deeper level, and I think that dimension of therapy is incredibly exciting to me as well.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So it's so to describe it, its difference is that it's kind of adding more techniques and more of the paradoxical techniques and more of that kind of spiritual dimension.
Brings T.E.A.M to life, the testing, the empathy, the assessment of resistance, and the methods. It's really kind of a textbook for the general public or therapists as well.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. It's exciting. Well, and that's available. I guess, everywhere books are available.
Oh, yeah, on Amazon. But a colleague told me that people are ripping me off on Amazon. You have to be careful if you go to Amazon to see my books, because there are these unscrupulous people with websites selling my books for like $40, $50, $80 a piece. And you can get my Feeling Good for like a few dollars if you buy it from Amazon rather than someone who's apparently they can buy space on Amazon. And
yeah, they can trick you. You have to look at the publisher, and I mean, there's a lot of unscrupulous people. So Amazon's one where maybe we'll just use a direct link to that. I'll find the direct Amazon link that isn't $180 for an original.
Oh, yeah. But on my website, there's a books page on feelinggood.com, and I think the links go to the correct places there on Amazon.
Okay. Well, good. That kind of describes those two things. I'm curious, like you've got a great book coming out. It sounds like something that I'll certainly pick up as a clinician and probably,
thank you.
Yeah. And you have this amazing app that I'm excited to see the results on and see how that works. What's next for David Burns?
Well, I'm just trying to get done what I'm doing right now. I had a heart attack in the summer.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It was kind of unexpected because I've always done a lot of running and stuff, but so I've done some kind of radical lifestyle changes, but I'm just really time becomes precious when it's always been precious to me. I'm just trying to get as much done as I can. And once we're done with the depression app, and we're pretty much the point now where we'll have a working version of the complete thing rather than just little pieces that we've been testing. There's another dimension that the 5 secrets of effective communication, the whole thing of relationship problems and the causes and treatments for relationship problems have no overlap pretty much with depression and anxiety treatment. And so I'll be developing a module on that, which I've been creating in my mind for more than 40 years, and I'm super psyched about that. And I also hoping to have a module on each of the anxiety disorders, because that's kind of my forte. So there would be like an OCD module, a panic attacks module, a social anxiety module, and those are going to be really fun and hilarious to create, although serious too, because anxiety is serious. But when I wrote When Panic Attacks that you mentioned, I by the time I finished it, I realized I've had 11 anxiety disorders myself.
Oh, wow.
And then in the next 6 months after it was released, I remembered 6 more that I had forgotten about. So I've had at least 17 anxiety disorders. So whatever a patient has, I can say, oh, I've had that too. And I know how much that sucks.
Yeah.
And it's going to be such a joy to show you how to crush that and how to free yourself of that. And I think that's a message that patients want to hear, that you, the therapist, are real and that you too have suffered, but you know the solution to their problem and you can guide them to that.
Yeah. That's excellent. So with the relationship module, are you looking at now, or have you in the past looked at like, not just for etiology, but for ways of working with like attachment as maybe the like original family of origin creation of like anxiety or depression?
I haven't, but I know a lot of people are very excited about that. I heard a presentation on that at Stanford. I'm on the voluntary faculty at Stanford, so these special presentations for the voluntary faculty and with some prominent attachment researcher. Now, I've done a lot of research, both as a clinician and during the early days when I was doing research on central nervous system biochemistry. And I thought the quality of the research was just shockingly horrible. And I got quite kind of turned off, but I have strong reactions to things. I know a lot of people love the attachment stuff, but the approach I describe in the book, Feeling Good Together, that's my interpersonal model, and it has to do with first of all melting away the resistance to change. If someone is not getting along with somebody, and I treat one person, I don't like treating a couple, because if I can only treat one of them, I can almost always get a good result. If you've got both of them, you're almost doomed as a therapist. That's my own thinking, which is not the same as everyone else's.
There goes several schools of psychotherapy down the drain.
Oh, absolutely. I know. But at any rate, it's focused on saying, first of all, do you want a better relationship with this person? Because you've given me a lot of reasons why you don't want to get close to this person. Maybe you don't. And then if they do, it has a lot to do with, I notice that you're blaming so-and-so. For the relationship, and if you want me to work with you, I have some good news and bad news. I can show you how to transform this relationship quickly and dramatically. But the bad news is you're going to have to look at yourself, your own role, and that's going to be very painful for you. And maybe that's not something you'd want to do.
Yeah, so controlling the frame that way is important. Well, as far as, I don't know if you've looked at Dan Brown and I think it's Stephen Elliott's work on, it's like a comprehensive 3 pillars model, but what they're doing is an integrative model that utilizes it's heavy on mentalization, which has a kind of CBT component in it, working with attachment. And imagery from hypnosis is the first pillar. Second pillar is that kind of Dan Brown probably would disagree, but it's kind of a mishmash of schema therapy, cognitive therapy, mentalization, and research in metacognition. And then the third pillar would be actually looking at the relationship and checking in. And seeing it as they said, people with attachment disturbances, they tend to take everything really personally. So it gives them, again, that meta perspective that a lot of paradoxical techniques or CBT techniques. So that's something you might want to look into. And they're working, on outcome studies. I can share that link with you. It's an excellent book. The literature review on attachment at the beginning of that book, which is it's like one half of the book, is very thorough, and because he's got like a 9 or 10 person theme that worked on it. But I can send that to you if you're at all interested. Okay, so it looks like you're working more in the realm of looking at attachment and relationship problem solving. The idea of only working with one person is intriguing. For in the couples therapy, it certainly probably would be a lot faster the way you're framing it like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the idea there is that if you're working with one person, it's clear they're going to have to do the changing because the other person isn't here.
Correct. Yeah.
And the moment you change, the other person will change. We always say you can't change other people. I always say you can't not change other people. You're changing every person you interact with at every moment of your life.
Yeah, exactly.
But you're creating your own hellish interactions with certain people as well. And if you want to stop doing that, and you probably don't want to stop doing that, it can be fun to blame people and to view them as negative entities and judge them and to feel morally superior. But if you wanted to get really close, that would require the death of yourself, one of the four great deaths. Yeah. But I would love to show you how to do that, but want to make sure that you really want to get close to this person and that you're willing to pay the price of doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Well, we talked for about 2 hours, it looks like. So maybe
we put 90% of our audience to sleep.
I know. Maybe I'll have to.
I've loved it.
Yeah, I might have. I'm thinking this might be a 2-episode approach.
That's a good way to do it. Sure. Yeah, I do a lot of my podcasts as 2 episodes.
But I really had a delightful conversation with you. And I think that people who stayed tuned will definitely, thank you so much for staying tuned, by the way. It will benefit a lot.
All 2 of you.
All 2. Well, I think our quote is a little bit higher than that for our audience, but I really appreciate the time. All the best to you, and keep us posted.
You, yeah, it's been delightful talking to you. I just love talking to clinical psychologists because of the tremendous critical thinking and training that goes into it. It's a long road. My wife is a clinical psychologist, and it's always a joy for me to. There's something about the mindset of psychology that is really cool.
I think it's flexible and creative. When we're at our best, on our good days or best days, we're flexible and creative, and since we started the podcast mentioning how creative this period is in your life, we'll end on that note.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Psychology Talk podcast. This podcast is intended for informative and entertainment purposes only. If you need a mental health professional, please seek one out. All material, copyright, the Psychology Talk podcast. Music is provided by the oddly Italianate named band Serenati. Ciao.